Nhân chuyến đi thăm Washington DC, tôi có đi những thắng cảnh và có gặp gỡ những người bạn. Đây là một số hình ảnh những nơi tôi đã đi qua.
The ships of that famous explorer. The statue has a 1492 hairdo. Can anyone tell me who that is? Especially little people. Who is that? It's not Napoleon. It's Christopher Columbus, but you were close, sir. Just a continent away. Christopher Columbus, you're right. How did you know? Okay, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Now, what do the three flags stand for? They represent his three ships. And the names of the ships were? The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And we have Columbus there because it's the District of Columbia. And we took Columbus's name and borrowed it and put an IA on the end, and that made the District of Columbia. We are headed towards Capitol Hill right now. On the right side of the bus, you'll notice a lot of... Now, if you look to your left, you will see the Capitol Dome. And this is going to be a good opportunity to take a picture. And since Anthony's pulling up to a red stoplight, as soon as the bus stops, you're going to be able to stand up and take that picture at the angle that you really want. So it's okay to stand up as long as we're standing still. I'm going to sit here for a minute. It's 288 feet above the ground. And the colonnade on top supports a statue that is 19 1/2 feet herself. She's made of bronze, and we call that statue the call to duty and the obligation that our public servants at 3:20 in the afternoon. So since it's still early in the afternoon, you could get off at this stop and walk around to the east side of the Capitol building. And that is where you can walk down the ramp into the visitor center. And you'll be able to get a free tour conducted by the Capitol tour guides. It takes about an hour to tour inside the Capitol if you're going on the guided tour. And if you just like to wander around in the visitor center, there are a lot of interactive things, especially for children. You can learn a lot inside the Capitol. And there are the bells of the Taft Memorial ringing out now. Now this is the Peace Circle here on the left. There are two female statues on top of the pedestal representing America weeping on the shoulders of history. And history holds in her hand a tablet with the names of the Civil War heroes from the naval battles. This will be stop number 2 on the red loop. And this is where you can get off the bus through the side door, walk straight forward to the sloping sidewalk that goes off to the right. Nice to see you. I was actually originally born in New York, but we lived in the DC area for about 30 years, so I got to know the city pretty well. As we round the Peace Circle, we're going to go past the west face of the Capitol building. As you look to the left, you'll notice the Capitol is, the rotunda is wrapped up in scaffolding because they're doing a facelift. About every 50 years they have to repair some cracks. There's nothing really wrong structurally, they just have to do a cosmetic job on the outside. Now up at the second level there, above the fountain is where the president would normally stand when he gives the inaugural address. We build a wooden platform up to that level. The president faces west towards the Washington Monument. And we've done that ever since Ronald Reagan, who was formerly governor of California, requested permission to face his native state. Straight ahead of us, and on the right now is a giant greenhouse called the National Botanic Gardens. Inside there are specimens of plants from all over the world. There's so much growing inside, the air is very fresh, and it's open from 9 to 5. Hey, let's have a big hand. Good job, guys. We're going on 32 in my family. As you look back here, this is Mr. Garfield, the statue of Garfield right behind us. He's appears to be looking towards the National Botanic Gardens. Garfield is famous because he was shot while in office, and he became the second president to die of a bullet wound, first being Abraham Lincoln. Now, if you look over to the right, the Civil War era statue there is General Grant, seated upon his horse, designed for promenade, walking, and visiting museums and monuments and memorials. The first of these museums is located here on the right, and this is going to be stop number 4 for the American Indian Museum.
Hát cho
This
Biển
is
Đông.
one of our more recent museums, and it represents the artifacts and the culture of Native American tribes of North America, Central America. The Atlantic Ocean slapped him in the face because in his autobiography he wrote that he had trouble staying awake on the flight. Opened up the cockpit and let the waves hit him in the face to keep him awake. True story. That makes sense. Alrighty, here is our art museum stop. I know all of you art lovers will want to get off here. This is the Hirshhorn Museum of Modern Art and Sculpture. This is stop number 6. Oh, Anthony, are we going to stop at stop number 6 here? Okay, good. We had to find a parking space in amongst the food trucks. This is, being an art museum, this is the only museum that was completed in 1855, which, as you probably can figure out, was over 100 years ago. Matter of fact, it was more like 150 years ago. And the castle was built to the new Republic of the United States for the purpose of building a museum for the advancement of scientific knowledge. The one requirement he has was that it be called the Smithsonian Institution, and that's exactly what happened. The Smithsonian Castle contains a crypt with some of the remains of James Smithson, and the castle is the headquarters of the museum system. We have 2 Smithsonian museums in New York, and a 20th museum is being built. We leave stop number 8, we're headed towards stops 9 and 10, and we've just clumped 9 and 10 together because of the construction on the new museum. So our next stop is going to be the Washington Monument. We'll be there in about 8 minutes, maybe 10. If you look to the right, you'll notice that it has from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Department of Agriculture, located on the right and the left side of the bus, is one of the largest departments here in Washington. It employs over 100,000 people. Can you believe that Abraham Lincoln was the originator of the agriculture department? And Lincoln hired 12 people to manage a small garden in this area in 1862. And by the time Franklin Roosevelt was president, these huge buildings had been built, and it now employs 100,000 people. So that's been an expansion from 12 to 100,000. Fertilizer that is needed down at the Capitol building. Because the Department of the Architecture's office has to use fertilizer on the ground. And the senators use fertilizer also, but for other purposes. Across the intersection here on the left is a building that used to be the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, but now serves as the United States Forestry Service. There is an office inside that brick building, and in the office is a very famous bear. He was the bear that told us only you can prevent forest fires. You remember his name? Smokey, a Smokey Bear. He's in there.
Ok, thì đó mà em là thấy được cái vấn đề lên chỗ Ok. Đây.
Why is he hiding in the woods?
Thấy được cái bức chì.
All right, looking to the left, you'll see what you all came here to see, the giant pencil. This is the Washington Monument, ladies and gentlemen, in all of its glory. It's 555 feet, 5 1/8 inches tall. This is the tallest stone structure in the world. We often call it a masonry structure because it's built and held together by the stones, the weight of the stones, and the mortar in between them. That's what makes it a masonry structure. It's not a concrete and steel building like a modern skyscraper. It was built in 1844, and they left off building it after they'd gotten up about 120 feet. And they literally ran out of money. This will be our 20th Smithsonian Museum. I always like to go by this construction site because I like work. I could watch it for hours. And on either side of this museum, we have the famous Washington, D.C. bird. You know we have an official bird here in Washington? We see a lot of them. You can see 2 of them on this. There it is. There are 2 of them. The giant crane. That museum was scheduled to be opened in the year 2015. Time to change to the summer hat here. Baseball season is almost over. Our next stop will be the Washington Monument. It's going to come up in about a half a block on the right side. Our monument was damaged in 2011 by a 5.8 Richter scale earthquake centering in Northern Virginia, and it's been wrapped up in scaffolding since until May of this year. They just opened it again at the beginning of the summer. We can now go up in the elevator. It takes 70 seconds from the bottom to the top. And this will be our stop number 10. From here you can switch to the blue later on today. More people coming down. If you and I make money in our basement, you know, you have a little printing press in the basement, you turn out dollar bills and you try to spend them, you're going to go to jail, right? But they make $1 million every day here and nobody bothers them. So what's the difference? Well, their notes say Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury, that's one thing. And they have the right to do it. It's by a list of things made by engineers. It has a lot of uses. It's used for recreation. That's why you see paddle boats there on the right. You can rent a paddle boat for $20 and go paddle around in front of the Jefferson Memorial. It's also used for walking. There's a path that goes all the way around the tidal basin. And it's 3.5 miles around. Because you never get rain in California, right? Well, we get more rain in Washington, D.C. than in the northwest of the United States by about 4.5 inches a year. And because of this flooding, the tidal basin was created to dredge the Potomac River and reduce the flooding. Across the tidal basin is the Jefferson Memorial. Franklin Roosevelt went to Congress in 1934 and requested a vote on his proposal that the government build a memorial to Thomas Jefferson, his favorite president. Congress agreed, and the memorial was started in 1937. It wasn't really completed until after World War II was over in 1947, when the bronze statue of Thomas Jefferson was installed in the main chamber. There you see the Jefferson Memorial on the right. And Jefferson is known as our 1, 2, 3 president. He was first Secretary of State, second Vice President under John Adams, and finally he served as our 3rd president during the era when we acquired the Louisiana Purchase from France and expanded the territory of the United States across the Mississippi River. And there's the Jefferson Memorial on the right. You go by slowly so you can take a picture. Thomas Jefferson served as a foreign diplomat to France and also traveled to England. He had been one of the best educated and most intelligent of our presidents. If you look to the right where you see the tidal basin, you'll notice there are trees growing all around the edge of the water there, and those are cherry blossom trees. Some of the ones with larger trunks go back 50 and 70 years. The cherry trees were given to us by the mayor of Tokyo, Japan in 1912. And that was the beginning of our Cherry Blossom Festival, which literally began in the 1920s. And these days we have a whole month of celebrations in April and May when the cherry blossoms are out. Now, as we go across this inlet bridge here, built in 1909, you'll see people in the paddle boat there on the right. Anthony's going to go nice and slow so you can get a good picture to the right side of the bus of the skyline of Washington, D.C. There's our Washington low skyline. Now, how would you compare this skyline to New York? What's different? No high-rises, that's right. Washington and Jefferson noticed that New York, in those early days in the 1700s and 1800s, was beginning to build high-rise apartment buildings, which is so necessary for democracy. On the left side of the bus, the river with the airplane going over, there's the Potomac River. This river connects with the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, so that ocean-going boats explored in this area back in the days of the 1500s and 1600s with John Cabot and Henry Fleet. As they took their ocean-going boats up this river, they were able to get as far as the Fall Line, which today we call Georgetown. And along the banks they found Native Americans trading, bartering goods, and the Algonquin Indian word, which was the prevalent language among the Indian tribes, the word for trading place was Potomac. And so the Potomac River got its name from the Algonquin Indian word for a great place of trade. Across the river to the left is Virginia. And you'll see, if you got good sharp eyes, you can look up on the hillside. Just a little bit ahead of us across the river is the Lee Mansion, owned by Robert E. Lee and his wife, who is the granddaughter of George Washington's wife, Martha Washington, Martha Custis. The Custis Lee Mansion there on the left, on top of that green hill at the Arlington National Cemetery. The building was captured by federal troops during the Civil War, and by the end of the war it had become Arlington National Cemetery. As we turn away from the river, we're headed towards our next stop, which is stop 13, and this will be the Franklin Roosevelt and the Martin Luther King Memorial. We're going to go by the Roosevelt Memorial on the right in just a moment.
Chỗ này là vô
And
cái
this entire area of
memorial
farmland to the
của
right
Martin Luther King.
with the apple trees and pear trees there.
Da
I
đen
have
mà.
a dream.
Part of the park connected with the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial. He's shown in a wheelchair because he was stricken with polio at the age of 39. He couldn't move around very well.
Chị tưởng không biết
He
đi
never
đâu.
wanted the press to photograph him below the waist because he's concerned that the American people might think that he was weak. That was before the days of the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the memorial itself, opened in 2004, is very walkable, very accessible. This is our stop, number 13, Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial and Franklin D. Roosevelt. The peninsula was overrun by communist forces from the north, and the United States and 16 other nations joined together to defend democracy in South Korea. You can visit the Korean War Memorial when you get off the bus at the Lincoln, and we're going to turn the corner and stop at the Lincoln Memorial, stop number 14 in a few minutes. And if you haven't been inside the Lincoln Memorial, this is a must-do while you're here in Washington, D.C. You absolutely have to go inside this memorial to see the impressive 19-foot statue of Abraham Lincoln seated, which was sculpted by the sculptor Daniel Chester French. It took him 4 years to carve the statue of Lincoln, which is often referred to as the American masterpiece of sculpture. It portrays Lincoln seated, and you can see the aspects of his character, both as a strong leader and a compassionate fatherly figure for the nation. He was our 16th president. The building itself was designed and modeled after the Parthenon in Rome. The 36 columns around the outside represent the 36 states at the time of Lincoln's death. And the main chamber contains the statue of Lincoln as well as the Gettysburg Address etched into the south wall and his second inaugural address etched into the north wall. These speeches are considered the best pieces of oratory of the entire history of the United States. This is stop number 14, Lincoln Memorial South. Shiny granite wall next to it, making a total of 19 plus 19, which is what? 38, right? And 38 is where the Korean Peninsula is divided between north and south today. Where are you guys from? Baltimore. I've heard of it. And where are you from?
The Bay Area. Oh, you went to Sac State?
I went to Sac City and then transferred to SM State.
SM State, that's where my daughter is.
So for those of you who like history, the Potomac River is a very historic river. In fact, during the Civil War, it was Abraham Lincoln's biggest fear that the Confederate soldiers would come across the river and invade the capital.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not so bad now. I work at home anyway, so. You know, my husband and I both work at home. So.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, I have.
If you look to the left, you'll see the Arlington National Bridge, connecting Virginia with Washington, D.C. The bridge is flanked by two equestrian statues, known as the Arts of War. And as you look across the bridge, you're looking right over into Virginia. There's Arlington House on top of the hill, the center of the Arlington National Cemetery. And you may visit there by getting on the blue loop at the next stop, number 15. That will take you over to Virginia. Looking at the river here, you'll notice an island in the middle of the river. Originally, an Indian tribe lived on that island, then later it was bought after settlers came. And it was occupied by Union troops during the Civil War. Performing arts, and right next to it is the Watergate Hotel. And if you look back towards the Washington Monument, there you'll see the monument surrounded by 36 columns. The upper section of the monument, known as the attic section, contains the names of all of the states of the United States.
Is that the Lincoln?
Yeah.
etched into the marble up at the top. And it's the Lincoln Memorial where Martin Luther King Jr. made his famous I Have a Dream speech in 1963, August 28th. And it was the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation issued by Abraham Lincoln in 1863. As we come around the corner here, we're headed towards stop 15. That's going to be our next stop. It is a transfer point to the blue loop that goes to Arlington. If you switch to the yellow loop at stop 15, the yellow bus will take you back to Union Station pretty quickly. If you're looking to go to Georgetown, I would recommend staying on this bus until we get to the White House at stop 21. And that will take you to Georgetown from there. Stop 15 brings us close to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial right around the corner. Many people think the awning on that building looks like a giant dove. And across the intersection to the right side is the United States American Institute of Pharmacy, as well as the wall itself. This is stop 15 on the red loop. It's a transfer point for the blue loop to Arlington. So if you're going to Arlington on the blue loop, this will be your stop.
E equals MC
E equals
squared.
MC squared, that's right. And if there was a musician and alive today, it would be E equals MC Hammer. Einstein, wasn't he the guy that invented the bagel? He had Einstein's bagels, right? That was his brother Mo Einstein, I'm sorry. But Albert Einstein was lecturing in the United States when he learned that the Gestapo had ransacked his house. So members of the government told him it would be best for him to stay here, and he did stay in the United States last week. So I guess it didn't work in my case. We are riding on Constitution Avenue right now. And coming up on the left is one of our large banking buildings. This is the home of the Federal Reserve Bureau. The Federal Reserve, of course, is that large banking organization that has 12 different districts throughout the United States. They adjust the rates of interest that banks can lend money to other banks. By adjusting the interest rates, they're supposed to put little breaks and checks and balances on our economy.
Chị chờ từ hôm giờ mới nhìn thấy mấy cái bông nó nở này.
That giant concrete eagle above the door there weighs over 10 tons. The next building on the left is the Department of the Interior. I have a good friend that went in there. When she found out about the Department of the Interior, she asked for help decorating her house. I told her they don't do interior decorations. They're in charge of the parks and the lands and the mines. Speaking of parks, our newest national park is located here on the right. This is Constitution Gardens, which you can see through the trees. Isn't it beautiful how the trees are changing color now? We got yellows and greens. Yeah. 2 weeks ago we had only green. Must be getting to be autumn. You can see the geese and the ducks wandering around there. Constitution Gardens was constructed during the 1970s when Richard Nixon was president, and he called for a commemoration of our Constitution and Declaration of Independence, celebrating the 200th anniversary of those documents. So Constitution Gardens has 2.5 miles of walking paths around it, and it's located very close to the
One. Get a picture of the crazy.
side of the bus. That flaming golden sword there was a gift from the nation of France in gratitude to the United States Expeditionary Force during World War I that liberated. there while the White House was being repaired. The White House has 132 rooms, and 35 of them are bathrooms. The Presidential Museum of African American History and Culture is scheduled to open in 2015, and the the things they built was the former Labor Department building on the left, which is now the Environmental Protection Agency. Tyrannosaurus Rex, right inside here. So if you want to see them putting a dinosaur together, you definitely want to go inside here. This is our stop 18 for the Natural History Museum. I got 2 seats together up here, 1 seat along there. Let's see, 1 more seat back here. And if somebody's really brave, you can sit next to me. There actually is a person speaking to you. It's me. Hi. Where are you from? Originally California. Okay, very good. But you escaped from California? How did you manage that? Okay, you live here? God help you. Why did you make the switch from California to here? Military. That explains everything. The Department of Justice is located to our left. And that building was designed by the same person that designed the Jefferson Memorial. On the right side, the Capitol building. Straight ahead of us, 7th Street. This is known as Restaurant Row here. But back in the days of the Civil War, there were no cars here, and there were no buses. It was all horses and wagons and cobblestone streets. Mary Lincoln did her grocery shopping at an open-air market right here on this spot. It was known as the Central Market. Farmers brought their produce, vegetables, livestock, down in ox-drawn and horse-drawn carts from Maryland down Center Avenue. And right here is where everybody did. As years went by, and now this is a city of over 600,000. On the right side of the bus, the punishment museum. We have the 48-hour ticket.
Chinatown.
And across the intersection, Verizon Center. Coming up is stop 19 for the Portrait Gallery. This is a transfer point for the Yellow Loop to go to Georgetown. If you'd like to get off here at 19, you can wait for a Yellow Loop bus. Stops 19, 20, and 21 all have stops where the Yellow Loop will come by and head north to Georgetown. So you could pick any one of these 3 stops. Isn't that what Disney World is? That's good. So there's a big alleyway there on the left. This is where John Wilkes Booth, assassin of President Lincoln, made his escape the night he shot Mr. Lincoln. Now, Booth was part of an organization that had planned to kidnap the president, the vice president, and the secretary of war. The three conspirators that worked with Booth changed the plan. After the Civil War was lost by the South, John Wilkes Booth got furious, decided to kill the president instead of kidnapping him, and he changed the plan. During the investigations afterwards, we're not here yet. Statue of the president sitting at the top of the bus being delivered to the museum. My friend nearly fell off his bicycle. So you can go inside that wax museum and get your picture taken next to creepy wax statues if you're into that sort of thing. That's a lot of fun. Madame, coming up on the right is the oldest theater in Washington. This is the National Theater here on the right.
National Theater đây.
Now playing
Hát cho
Pippin.
biết đọc đây.
Well, across the street on the left is Freedom
nơi đây
Plaza.
là chỗ
Freedom
mà
Plaza is
đã
often
tổ
used
chức
for news broadcasting. It's right
hát
in
cho
front
Biển
of the
Đông.
City Hall of Washington, D.C. Then you see City Hall on the other side of it.
Nó mới đi bộ rồi.
Lớn quá ha.
Nó đi bộ đường trong này lên White House.
District of Columbia, the
White
other
House
one is
nữa.
District flag. White House. Stop 21 coming out. This is a transfer point for the yellow loop. This is your major transfer point for the yellow loop going to Georgetown. So if you want to ride up to the zoo,
Ăn cà phê, uống cà pháo.
you'll pick up the green trolley at the Hilton Hotel. You want to get off the bus here, transfer to the yellow loop, straight ahead around the corner to the right.
Đó,
The
cái
yellow
Treasury
loop will stop
Department
right
là
up
đây.
there.
Kế bên là White House. Đó, cái chỗ mà trung ương, cái sở của em làm ở đây.
That's right. See you later.
Department of Treasury Department.
And when he was elected president, he was fighting with Congress from day one. When they asked him where to put the Treasury building, he said, "Put it here where it blocks my view of those scoundrels down there on Capitol Hill." So that's where they built the Treasury building, blocking the view of President Andrew Jackson from his enemies on Capitol Hill. Now, can you imagine a situation in the United States? In Andrew Jackson's time, he had a building to use. They called him King Andrew in those days. Statue on our right is General Sherman, who burned his way through the South, making himself very unpopular with Southerners. And the White House Visitor Center is going to be here on the right as we come to the corner of Pennsylvania Avenue and 14th Street, just ahead of us. That is going to be stop 22 and the newly renovated Visitor Center with the blue awning here on the right. You can go inside and learn all sorts of things about the White House.
Thấy không? Cái sân nó từ đó, từ ngay chỗ này tới dài ở trên kia.
Favorite desk.
Cái sân vậy hả?
And find postcards and souvenirs. Getting off here at stop 22, White House Visitor Center. Stop 22, White House Visitor Center. Anyone getting off here? Alrighty. Looks like we're all staying on board upstairs. To our right. And the tall tower with the clock in it is the only skyscraper built in. This is the old post office building on the right.
Cái này là cái nhà gì mà lớn ở bên tay phải.
The old post office building has been renovated.